it's culturally and functionally different from how you would approach it in smaller companies. So SK, our speaker this evening, highly distinguished, 28-year veteran of Lockheed. He started as an engineer and basically created his own career. And that's really why he brings a tremendous amount of insight. He's also a well sought after speaker on matters of advancement, especially for minorities in corporate America. So he is a charter member of Silicon Valley and a fellow colleague. So with that, let me just welcome SK. Thank you very much.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you. I don't know about you all, but I forgot to do Namaste for decades. I came to this country and wanted to be an American. Didn't want to be East Indian. Didn't want to be South Asia. I wanted to be an American. And over the years, I discovered that it was not. I need to turn this on, right?
Thanks. Yeah. I discovered it wasn't a question of what I wanted to be, but what I was seen as. The perception isn't what you would like the people to see you at, but how they see you. And like it or not, I look an Indian, or South Asian, or Asian, whatever you call it, and I speak like an Indian. So how many of you had an accent before you came to this country? See, I love to tell everyone, I did not have an accent till I came to this country. Back in India, everybody talks like me. So I only got an accent when I came here. It was not how I spoke, but how people listened. So it's not my problem that if you have trouble understanding me, not this crowd, but. So, for a long time, I was focused on my career. Yeah, once I finished college, I was practically broke, and worked my way trying to build savings, etc., etc. Some of you, can relate to that very well. And so I was focused on getting to a point where I would have a safety net for my family, etc. Could send my kids to good school. I used to tell my wife, I'll provide the basics. You need to save, do something to provide the college fees for the kids. We have 2 kids, and she did. She did her fair share. And over the years, I became a vice president at Lockheed in Denver, and after a couple of years there, I came transferred to Sunnyvale. And I used to be in Sunnyvale. I left 6 years earlier. And when I came back, people walked up to me and said, "Congratulations, one of us made it." First time someone said that, I didn't know what they meant. Second time, I'm beginning, I'm not an idiot, so I'm beginning to pick up a theme here that there is something going on. So I go to my buddy who's a vice president of HR and say, so what's going on? Why am I hearing this theme that congratulations, one of us made it? He said, have you looked around yourself? What do you mean? He said, how many Asian vice presidents do you see? I was the only one. When I left here 6 years earlier, there were a division president, there was a company president, there were 2 vice presidents, I was one of the 3 directors were here. When I came back, I was the only vice president. In 6 years, it had changed a lot. And so I realized, whether I liked it or not, I was a role model for the company, for the people for the Asians in the company. And I started looking at data and discovered that, and I'm not going to use the actual numbers because it's still sensitive, the percentage of managers at Lockheed was only 20% of the percentage of the Asian American population. That gap was a little too much for me to walk away from. I all my life believed in fair and reasonable, and that gap to me was unfair and unreasonable. And so over the years I started working on how do I help each Asian reach his or her potential. And I did a lot of work within Lockheed Martin, and since I've retired 2.5 years back, I've worked with an organization called Ascend. Ascend is another non-profit, but it is across all Asians. And it is primarily finance related, but it has become huge in the last 5-6 years. It's funded by the major 4 accounting firms. And we just had the annual forum, annual meeting in Anaheim, and there were 1,800 people for 3 days. So it has grown to be a pretty large Asian American. So they do a lot of things, and I want to talk about 2 things. One, we teach something called Executive Insight Series, and that's a 2-day course. We teach 5 modules. So what you're going to hear today is a 1-hour summary of the 2-day course. And I'm not going to use any of their material because their material is copyright. So I worked this weekend to make my own material, which has no relationship to their material. And the other thing they do is they have been working at the executive level, and they have a course at Stanford called Advanced Leadership Program for Asians Only. They don't say only in their program title, it's an executive course. The only university that I know of that has created a program for one specific race. It's open to everybody, but so far no one but Asian has come there. We did the 4th year at end of July, beginning of August this year. We had 40 people from 26 different countries. So we have had about 140 people go through it, and it's geared at senior vice presidents, senior directors, vice presidents at that level. So we are doing a lot of stuff. There's one course that we're starting with Chicago, University of Chicago Booth School, called Emerging Market Leaders. That's going to roll out next year. And that's not exclusive to Asians, but it is geared towards Asia. So Asia is one of the major emerging markets, so it's geared towards that. And we work with the schools and facilitate, etc. So anyway, that's, so if you guys are really serious about learning how to move up in corporate America, large corporate America, so think about attending one of those 2-day seminars, 2-day workshops, so that you can get an idea of a little more hands-on than what you're going to hear today. There we go. So I don't know who you are. So give me an idea about who you are from your company's revenue. So how many of you work for a company that has no revenue? The first question, how many of you have frozen shoulders? Any of you have frozen shoulders? No. Okay, so I want to see everyone raise their hand to show me that they don't have frozen shoulders. Thank you. Because we're going to do a lot of this, because this is how we're going to interact, and I'm going to find out what matters to you all and what doesn't. So how many of you work for a company that's revenue is less than $500,000 a year? Okay. How many of you work for a company that has revenue of about $2 million a year? Okay. $1 billion. $5 billion. $10 billion. $30 billion. Okay, good. So we have a variety of everybody. So just to give you an idea, the Fortune 500, actually Fortune 100 starts at 30 billion and above. Fortune 500 starts at about 10 billion and above. Fortune 100 starts at 1,000 starts at 1.8 billion and above. We are also rolling out an initiative at Ascent for corporate executives for the Fortune, corporate board members for the Fortune 500 companies. And we just are working on the press release this week. So, okay, then the other thing I want to understand is at what level of your career are you all? So if there were 10 steps in your 10 levels in your organization, CEO, chairman being the highest level, and intern being the lowest level, how many of you are at 0 to 1? Yeah, 1 to 2. There is no 0, sorry. Interns are the closest to it comes to 0. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great. So again, we have a breadth of everything, which will give us a good flavor of all different levels of experience in the room and all different levels of companies that we have here. So who am I? I'm a crazy person who has taken advantage of opportunities over my life and made strange decisions over the years. Back in '68, when I was applying for engineering colleges, IIT graduates were getting 450 rupees a month. And there was a college called Marine Engineering College in Calcutta where you graduated and got 750 rupees a month. And got to wear a sexy white uniform with shorts and everything, and you got paid to see the world. So, fought with my dad, gave up IIT Kanpur and moved to Marine Engineering College and regretted that for a long time. But I sailed at sea for 8 years, then my daughter was born and there was no way I was going to basically be sailing for 8 to 9 months a year and have her, at home. So they joined me on the ship in Khurramshahr, Iran on her first birthday, and we sailed to north of Spain and came over to States for a vacation and decided to stay. So I went to school at University of Michigan and got my second degree in 9 months and then became a naval arc. Went from Marine Engineering to naval arc. A couple of years later, Lockheed heard what I was doing with the Navy back in DC, and they came out to look at that, and then they made me an offer, and the company said, yes, go, it will be a good experience for you. So I went to Lockheed and became a shipbuilder. So I built ships for 5 years, and then Lockheed decided to get out of shipbuilding, and I was offered the opportunity to move to Sunnyvale and became a missile builder. So I built missiles, I built spacecrafts, and my claim to fame is a stealth ship called Sea Shadow. How many of you have seen the movie Tomorrow Never Dies? The James Bond movie. There's a plump guy like me there with a salt and pepper beard. He's the computer jock for the bad guy. And at the end, the bad guy shoots him. If you remember what his name is, it's Gupta. That's my 5 seconds claim to fame. My customer was a consultant on the movie, and based on, and he asked that some character be named, and unfortunately they decided to name the bad guy who gets shot. It was my claim. And then during that time I started moving up in my career and got an opportunity to do a special assignment for the division president on, it was called competitive action plan to make us more competitive, but really we landed up doing process improvement. And I did that at the division level, then they liked what I was doing, asked me to do it at the company level, and after 2 years, corporate heard what I was doing, and corporation said, we want you to do this at the corporate level. So I went to Bethesda, Maryland, moved for 4 years, and did that for 4 years at corporate, and then I said, I'd really like to get back to hardware. And I worked with everybody and managed to get back to Denver as the Vice President for Operations for Entire Space Systems. And that's what I did for the last 10 years. So that's who I am. During my time in Bethesda, I worked as a director. I worked for a very, very, I used to say he had stature, the gentleman that I worked for. He was a corporate vice president at Lockheed Martin, and when he spoke, everybody listened. So after about a year of working for him, I was having a career conversation. So he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I'd like to be line vice president as opposed to a staff vice president. I wanted to be line vice president. He was a staff vice president, but he had been a line vice president before. And he basically looked straight at me and said, you'll never be one in this corporation. And I said, why not? And he says, you're not an alpha male. So I did my typical Indian thing, thank you so much, etc., and walked away. I thought about it for 3 days, and then I went back to him. I said, Jack, if I'm not an alpha male, what am I? He had a PhD from Purdue, and he's a very smart guy. And he thinks about it, and he says, you are a highly competent beta male. Have you ever heard that term? I think that describes most Asians. We are not the American alpha males, we are the highly competent beta males. So what do I do? There's a book out there, had just come out on alpha males. I go buy that book. I have an executive coach and I work with her and come up with a few things that would help me close the gap. process improvement, you're always looking to figure out what the gap is and how to close the gap. And I came up with 3 things that I had to learn. Rule number 1 that I had to learn, the only person in charge of my career was me. Not my mom, not HR, not my boss, only me. But what are we all taught? Work hard, work smart. If it is meant to be, it will be. It is kismet, karma, fate. How many of you got taught that when you were growing up? I mean, that's our culture. That's what our parents were taught. That's what they teach us. That's what we teach our kids. Rule number 2 I had to learn was the best way of making sure you don't get something is by not asking for it. And the analogy I use is if you're back in India or Asia, anywhere, and somebody shows up at your door at lunchtime, you invite them to join you. Common courtesy, right? But they also are required to say no. It's okay. I just ate and came, or something like that. But the culture is such that you know that they will say no at least twice, if not thrice. So you ask them 3 or 4 times. And finally they say, yes, sure. Here when my boss said, SK, I've got a special assignment for you with the vice president. He's looking for someone to work on this project. I was like, sure, it's me and not Jack or Mary or John. Yeah, Mary might be good. Let me go talk to her. I said, wait, I'll just be polite. So I had to learn that, if I want something, I had to go ask for it as opposed to waiting to be asked. So one of the things, the title of my thing is Speak, Ask and Raise Your Hand. So we are taught not to speak up. We are taught not to ask for things, but wait to be asked. And we are taught not to raise your hand. We actually did a training session at Harvard Business School for women, where they taught the women to raise their hand because women were being very, very hesitant in raising. They did a study. So I got a lot of stories, so guys, so bear with me. They did a study in school in the 6th grades here, and they looked around and they said, at what percentage level do the white boys, who are all white in this class, Caucasians, at what confidence level do they raise their hand and say, yes, ma'am, ask me the question? What do you think? The boys? 50%. If they thought they were 50-50 right, they raised their hand. What about girls? They were somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. What about Asians? We need to be 100% right before we raise our hand. Right? So part of it is we have to learn, speak up, ask, and raise your hand. The third rule I had to learn was the pull is stronger than push, but nobody pulls somebody who's not pushing themselves. So you have to push yourselves. But what are we taught? Don't be the nail that's coming out of the plank, you'll get hammered down. The loudest bird gets shot first. Don't be pushy, that's rude. Can you all relate to that? That's what we were taught. So part of our challenge is the cultural upbringing that we all have had, which doesn't work in the American corporate environment. So we need to figure out what is it that we need to do different. So we don't need to change ourselves, but we need to overcome some of the things that we've been taught. You have to be true to yourself. And the last one basically is exceed expectation. If you're doing your job in the company, you're just being paid to do your job. You got to exceed expectations. You got to figure out how they said, wow, I didn't think you would get done in 7 days. I thought it would take you a month to get this done. That's what part of my learning was. So the question for you all is, what are the 3 rules that you have to learn? These are my rules for me. Each of you will have different rules that you have to learn to overcome your upbringing, your parents' guidance, grandmother's teachings. So you've got to think about what is it that is hampering you from doing that. Okay, so I would like you all to take a few minutes and meet your neighbors at the table, shake their hand, introduce yourselves, and talk about one thing which, if you changed, your career would get on a fast track in your corporation. Can you do that? And remember, no BMW. which stands for no bitching, moaning, whining.
Terry?
So you can't be bitching, moaning, whining. You have to think of positively one thing that if you did differently, your career will get on the fast track. Okay, so let's take a few minutes to do that.
Sure. You want to start? Okay, go ahead. Which corporation are you with? Yeah, so I'm with that kind of starting with a small company. Yeah, me too. It's a big but prior to that, I was 15 years in Cisco. Okay. So I know what it's like. I know I think the biggest thing probably that I could improve on is probably speaking more so right now I'm on technical marketing. So prior to that I was always in marketing. Probably just speaking up and speaking up. Because I tend to have
So I am actually full-time here at Tyson. I'm working manager. Prior to that, I did PR consulting for startups, and I've dabbled in some of my own. Right now, I'm working on mobile resource management application for particular construction companies to help with job sites. My problem, I think, would be is being more risky. I'm afraid to really go out there and talk to customers to feel like to be shut down. So we don't need this product. This isn't, the market isn't ready for this. I'm afraid to hear that. And I think I need to, like they always say, get out of the office more and really test the product rather than theorizing what could go wrong in my head.
just do something and take some risks.
Exactly. I feel like I'm doing a whole bunch of small things, but I'm not really making those big incremental changes because I'm afraid to hear that this isn't something that we want. And I think that's my main problem. That's why I haven't really gone anywhere with some of my ideas. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely moving forward now, and we're kind of bursting that bubble, but I wish I had known it sooner than later, and I probably would have more successes.
So, my background is right now I run my own startup practice. I wish I could get faster. So, a lot of people get started. And not necessarily making a call on as quickly as we might do. So in some cases, this opportunity is something.
Okay, wrap up in about a minute.
Yeah, you do, and anyway. So the first thing I say is probably one of my biggest mistakes is actually yeah. I actually regret not having left. I could have always come back. Yeah. It would have been nice to join a smaller company where you have more expectations and more challenges. So that's the main thing. In a big company, you tend to just focus on...
Okay, you guys ready to share with the rest?
Yeah. Never been incorporated, but I would imagine.
Okay, can someone shout out one that's from that table?
The one I had was I don't socialize with management. People in power.
I'm going to label that as relationship building. This table?
I think the one we had here, which I think resonated, was just in terms of promoting yourself.
Would you call that salesmanship?
Along those same lines, I think what the example she was giving was, if you do great work, how do you, in the right fashion or in the right mechanism, call out that you have performed something or done something extraordinary?
She didn't get the lecture from her mom saying, don't boast about yourself.
Right, right.
Yeah, what was the phrase? Apne muh miya mittu. Can someone translate that for me?
Yeah. Assertiveness.
There's a fine line between assertiveness and aggressiveness, right? This table?
Frank but polite.
And assertive.
Managing the boss, understanding the boss, helping him succeed.
I had a job where I really didn't have a job title, so people used to say, what's your job? I said, it's my job to make my boss look good. And then one day he throws a temper tantrum and says, you keep implying that I can't look good without your help. I said, no, the problem is you haven't given me a title. So that night I had a title. That too.
Taking risks.
Oh, but Asians are not risk takers.
Not fearing failure and making prompt decisions.
I'm just going to say deal with failure. Failure is okay. How's that?
We came up with two things. One is confrontation, constructive confrontation, and the other one was being able to show tangible results in a short time.
Hopefully you guys can read my handwriting. Did I miss any table? Does anybody have the urge to call out something that they have? I'm like that. If I have an urge to speak, I speak. So does anybody have urge to share one that we didn't miss?
Yeah, I started my career in Texas. My one big regret is not learning to speak football and baseball. In 1970.
We didn't discuss this, but I think it's good to have a real mentor as opposed to artificial.
Be clairvoyant.
But last but not least is there's always an option for TIE, is fostering entrepreneurship, right? So looking at alternatives.
So one of the, when Venk and I were talking about this class, one of the things we talked about was the difference between an entrepreneurial organization and a large corporation. In entrepreneurial organizations, we focus a lot on networking. I mean, the people who work, they focus a lot on networking, not just in the existing company, but the next one, or the one that, is doing something different, similar, bigger company, because the idea is to either move or make connections or, something, because that is very, very important in an entrepreneurial environment. In a large corporation where people work for 20, 30, 40 years, it's different. I was one of the really outside the corporation, really didn't have much of a network. The corporation had 130,000 people. That's a large enough network for me to work with, as opposed to having to step outside to create a new network. And what do I need a new network for other than to help my career, help my organization, etc. So that's one of the things that we talked about the difference between a large corporation and entrepreneurial corporation. So with given all this stuff, we can talk about any of them for days. What do you want to talk about? And I'll let you all decide what we want to talk about. I do want to talk about the first one. But other than that, I'm game with anything. So, go ahead.
Politics.
Okay? Okay? Okay?
Managing change.
We're going to talk about everything. All right, so we'll go through it and So here's a famous line. I used to speak a lot, both in my role as the company VP of Operation as well as the founding member of an organization called CAL, Council for Asian American Leaders. And I used to travel across the country and have a lot of sessions, this big, larger, smaller, etc. One of the things I discovered is Asians, and I'm generalizing here, so I apologize for that, but in a large group, so bear with me, okay? Asians are not good at asking questions in public. I would go to a meeting, I'd have a lot of Q&A, and at the end of it, all the Asians would get together around me and ask questions, one-on-one. That's our culture. We prefer one-on-one versus a public question. Standing up in public and for multiple reasons, we don't want to embarrass the speaker, we don't want to stand up and say something that may not be smart, etc., etc. But that is one of the quickest way of getting yourself recognized in a corporation outside your immediate organization. And one of the things I noticed is if an Indian is speaking, and I'm again exaggerating here, there will be an Indian in the audience who will want to give me a lecture. So part of what I want you all to practice today is asking questions as a well thought out lesson. So we got another hour here. So in an hour, feel free to raise questions, and if it doesn't work here, that's fine. Think about doing it in your comfortable environment, think about doing it with your wife, with your kids, etc. But think about how to ask a question that is not BMW, is not bitching, moaning, whining about what HR did to you 3 weeks back, or etc., or what your boss did, etc. But it is related to the subject of the speaker, and it is looking for the speaker to shed some light on that question. People are not here to listen to you expounding a theory. If you want to do that, you should be a speaker. So think about, good example, when you see TV shows, I know a lot of you watch, like my wife, the Indian drama, etc., etc. But take the time sometime to watch a Q&A session with some politician, some fireside chat, etc. Think of the way they ask questions and the kind of question they ask. That's an art. They will ask a short question, but a very insightful question to dig out some story from the other person that they may not have thought of telling. So that's the kind of question I would like you all to practice speaking in public. Not what your boss did on your last rating, etc., etc. That's not the type of question you like to hear in an audience. But part of it is raise your hand. So who has a question just now? Thank you.
The first bullet point. So that's an area where I find myself not in the bright spot. So I know some sports, but those are not the popular sports here. So how do I develop that skill?
How long is your commute?
My commute is 15 minutes.
What do you listen to while you drive?
News.
Okay, what kind of news?
KLIV.
I don't know that.
So,
In NPR? Okay, yeah. So think of changing the station to I don't know the names, 740, 680, the ABC, etc., CBS, etc. station, because they cover the local sports. NPR is not very good at covering local sports. So if you want to get comfortable, you better know whether the Seahawks beat the hell out of the 49ers or not last weekend. Because they're going to talk about it at work.
10:50 a.m.
10:50 is good.
Yeah, so there are no shortage of stations like that, so good question. So think about practicing, taking the time that you're driving to enhance a skill that you identify that I need to work. Because you're locked in your car for 15 minutes, right?
You can comment on, I normally what do is in such conversations, I just ask questions like, okay, so what does it mean or that kind of stuff, instead of contributing anything. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that is a good strategy.
It's not a bad strategy, but you've got to get comfortable with one sport. It doesn't have to be every sport. But at the same time, if you're in Texas and Dallas Cowboys lost to Redskins, you better know that when you go to work. Because everyone's going to be mourning. Especially if the quarterback got distracted by his girlfriend. You guys are not laughing, you don't know that story. Never mind. There was a hand back there.
So, about your ability to ask questions, you said something about Asians that they want to be 100% right before. And that happens with me because you said something about asking insightful questions. So my mind's like always checking my questions, like is it really insightful or am I going to embarrass myself? So that it's sort of conflicting, at one point you want to be asking insightful questions, but not always have very insightful questions to ask.
So I'm at a meeting in Bethesda, and my CEO chairman is speaking, and he's taking question answer. So I write down a question, show it to my buddy who's the finance controller, and he said, okay. So I just did a quick check with him and had a question to ask. I also had a reputation at Lockheed of asking weird questions. Another time as CEO, I asked him, I said, the last CEO took 18 months to replace all his direct reports. You've been in the job for 12 months, how are you doing? I mean,
I'll never ask that question.
he did a great job of saying, I have a great staff, I don't need to replace anyone, etc., etc. But as there's only SK can ask that kind of question and live. So that was my style. I have a corny sense of humor, and I enjoy it. Yeah, good.
So we are on topic of asking questions. If you see Asians, they ask a lot of questions to build relationships. So I want to go to the first point, that can we use this as skill to build relationships?
Yes, but remember, when I talk about our art of asking questions, I'm talking about a large gathering like this, a bigger gathering, So that's not where you want to build relationship. That's where you want to stand up and be seen as somebody who has a smart question to ask. And if someone says, that's a stupid question, no one will say that, no speaker will say that. But think about the question to ask. Get comfortable asking questions in a comfortable environment. You don't want to do that the first time, when you're seeing a CEO's meeting, etc. You want to do that, in an office, your colleagues, your peers, your one boss or something in that environment. But practice.
So differentiating between a smart question and a smart direct question, how would you be sure that, there is a tendency to ask a question where you either know the answer or you hope that he knows the answer.
The smart thing is to never ask a question where the speaker does not know the answer. If you're trying to make the speaker look bad by asking a question that he or she may not know, you're not helping yourself. So you should always ensure that you ask the speaker a question. So like my question to that day, which I checked off with the controller was, how does Lockheed decide when to buy back its stock in the market? The chairman knew that answer. He wasn't going to share that answer with us. Because then we would all know when to exercise the options. But he dealt with it. It was a question that was of answer would have been interest to everybody in the room. Now, my question about when you're going to fire all your things, that was a smart aleck question that I shouldn't have asked. So that's the fine line you got to draw.
What are the other ways of getting the art of asking questions? Like when you said listen to the fireside chat. So what are the other ways?
Speak a little louder. Project. Think I'm in the next room.
So like I like the one which you said that to build the art of asking question, you need to listen to the fire chat and the way people are asking. So are there any other ways to get that skill? I mean, with your experience.
There are just two ways: learn from others and practice. And every skill that we have listed here is the same thing. You have to observe others who are doing those things right. So I'm going to keep moving here. So I'm going to talk about executive presence. So I told you I had an executive coach at Bethesda when I was a director. So one of her feedback was you need to develop your executive presence. And I said, oh my God, what is that? What does that mean? So I thought in my mind, who do I know who has the best executive presence? And I thought of this vice president who was head of our Palo Alto labs, and I called him up. I said, Aram, I need to develop my executive presence, so would you be my mentor? He said, it'd be a pleasure to be a mentor because we already had a relationship, etc. And I started listening to him, and so one of his recommendations was, within the first 10 minutes of a large meeting, where you have peers, bosses, etc., ask a question that is relevant, insightful, and has not been asked. But if you are going to sit there for the 2-hour meeting or something and not ask a question, which is very typical of Asians in large corporations, you're going to be seen as not interested. You're going to be seen as he doesn't know or she doesn't know what we're talking about. You say, what's the value of that person in this meeting? So if you are in a meeting, you have to contribute, either with a smart answer or with a smart question. So there is no magic to it other than to observe people who are doing it and follow. One of the things I learned when I was much younger, I read a book called Dress for Success. Any of you ever heard of the book? I'm dating myself, so And one of the things I learned from that was you do not dress for what your peers wear, you dress for what the job you want. So I remember telling my wife that, honey, you need to iron my shirts or give them to laundry now. I can't just take out from the dryer and hang it and wear it. And she was mad at me. We didn't have the money to go, give to laundry, but, so she had to iron it, but it worked. It was a good investment. Sorry, you've been waiting to ask a question.
I've been doing management consulting, and for my job I had to go many years in Dubai and Middle East area, which made me work a lot more with people like us and Asians. And what I want to say, it's not a question but a comment, and from observation and practice, that most of the time when I was in meetings and a question would come, it was always insightful. It was always full of wisdom. And we all would sit down and really listen and analyze what they said, because I think by nature our cultures are so intuitive, so full of wisdom, that we just bring that. And we just have to trust that because we feel the pulse of the organization, we do have relevance and not be afraid to ask that questions.
Very well. The difference is that we are in a different environment here. And so it takes a little bit of courage to speak up. But that's the risk that you all have to learn to, we all have to learn to do. So let's move on to I'm keeping an eye on the watch so I can get you guys out of here in time. Relationship building. We had that somebody here showed up relationship building. Who was that? What do you mean by that? Relationship building with whom?
People above you, superior, or higher position.
Is that important?
Actually, what he might want to say is relationship building with the people who can help you to achieve what you want.
So one of the courses that I teach is called Managing Up. And part of what we teach is, it is not your boss that you need to manage, and we had one of those things about managing your boss, etc. It is your boss's boss. Who's going to give you your next promotion? Not your boss, you want his job or her job. You really want who's going to give you that job that your boss has today? Isn't that what you're aspiring for? So who's going to make that decision? So part of what you need to think about is that decision comes from a level higher or input of the peers of your boss. So that's where you need to think about building your relationship. And how do you make that relationship? We talk about mentoring. Somebody asked for mentoring. What's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor? And a coach? Anybody? How many of you have a mentor? None of you have a mentor? That's it? If you want to build relationships, this is one of the easiest way. It is a very flattering thing to go to your boss's peer or your boss's peer, depending on your organizational hierarchy, and say, I'm looking for a mentor to help me improve my career or improve my skills. They are flattered. They would love to mentor people. I usually have a room full of people who say, I have 2 mentors, 3 mentors, etc. So I'm surprised, that is an easy thing to win. It's very easy to go and ask somebody, would you be my mentor? And mentor is not lifelong. Mentor is not forever. Mentor is, you may have 3 or 4 mentors and one of them works better than others, and that's fine.
How do you even you said fear of boss, right? That means, in a large organization, they think that they're looking for a change or job change, right? Are looking for a different opportunity. How do you handle such situations? That your intention is to get a mentorship, not to get a job or something like that. Right?
So part of it is you have to have relationships every day. You cannot suddenly walk up to your boss's boss and say, I'd like to talk to you. When you're in a meeting where he or she is already there, take the time to make small chat. Whether it's 49ers or how are your kids doing this week, or is your son gone to college yet or not? I know people who keep track of every customer's family member's name, etc., etc. So you can't just suddenly show up. One of the things I teach is called elevator speech. So you must, have, if you show up with your boss's boss in the elevator, he says, so how's it going this week? He said, fine, sir. We just lost a great opportunity.
Why? Why though?
You have him for 45 seconds.
No, if the guy said, how is it going? He said, fine. So
now here's what I would do. Okay?
No, but if that guy is not interested in digging more,
how do you know that?
The guy is actually doing really great. He's really very smart. He contributed to one of the greatest things in the group. And if that guy is not really figuring out how he has done it, and does he really care for it?
That's where you need to think about. Do you really want to build a relationship or not? If you do, you need to.
Not that, the very smart people, very successful people who have done this, and then they know what it needs to do.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting. Are we talking about relationship building, or are we talking about something else?
No, talking about, trying to.
But he is stuck with him for 40 seconds anyway.
Right? So
you got 40 seconds, and you lost the 40 seconds by saying fine. What I would do, I was in Bethesda, I'm in the elevator with the CEO, I say, SK, how's it going? Because, they all knew who I was. even though I was a director and there was a, I worked for a vice president who reported to them. And I said, fantastic, so I had a great trip to Ovigo. Really changed some minds there. They said, yeah, do I need to know about it? No, you're fine. Some time I said, I had a great trip to Orlando and Joe Cleveland was real great. Yeah, Joe's a good guy. So you got a good relationship with him? I'm working on it, sir. Now, next time you'll remember, I'll ask Joe what he thinks of SK. You got 40 seconds. You can either use it or lose it. So, and part of what I teach is think about multiple different elevator speeches. There's one for your boss's boss, there's one for your boss's peer, one for the finance guy who controls all your budget. He really doesn't care about, and you're not going to sit down at home and write all this stuff. You're going to think about this as a 15-minute drive to work. If I run into a CFO and he asks me how are things going, what's my one-liner quick reply that gets a hook into him? So that's how you start relationship building. You can't just show up at the boss's door and he doesn't even know who you are and say, boss, I'm so and so, I need a YouTube mentor. That doesn't work.